everybody. Welcome back to the Persistence Outdoors podcast. It's Samuel Allred on the mic, and today we're going to talk about choosing a shotgun for hunting. Shotguns are the most versatile hunting weapon in that you can use them to hunt just about any animal, and all you have to do is change your load. So for upland game like pheasants, grouse, and quail, you'll load your shotgun with some form of birdshot. And for waterfowl like ducks and geese, you'll use non-toxic, usually steel, birdshot. And then let's say you want to hunt turkeys. Well, you might choose a magnum lead or even tungsten load that contains a large volume of shot and powder. But shotguns aren't only limited to birds, which is what makes them so versatile. You can also hunt small game with a shotgun, so rabbits, squirrels, coyotes, raccoons, all sorts of small mammals, and you can hunt big game. Hunting deer with a shotgun loaded with slugs is a very common occurrence in the Midwest and eastern side of the US. So for someone who's looking to maximize their hunting opportunities, a shotgun is a great option. And on top of that, a functional shotgun is often cheaper than an equivalent rifle. With a rifle, you kind of feel like you're buying a precision instrument because you may shoot a rifle out to 200, 300, even 400 yards. And so you kind of do need it to be accurate and repeatable. A shotgun, by virtue of how it's constructed, doesn't have the capability for that kind of precision. You're shooting out of a smooth barrel, and shotgun projectiles, even slugs, are not very aerodynamic. So they're going to lose velocity quickly and experience much more wind resistance than a rifle bullet. This means that the effective range of a shotgun is much shorter than that of a rifle. With slugs, hunters usually keep their shots within 150 yards or so, and with birdshot, you're talking anywhere from 10 to 40 yards. So when you're buying a shotgun, compared to a rifle, you kind of adjust your expectations for precision, and you're accepting that you're going to hunt at closer ranges. But if you can get past all that, you will have an incredibly useful and versatile tool to hunt just about any game animal in North America. All right, before we get further into it, please take a moment to follow the podcast and leave a 5-star rating on whatever platform you listen on. This will help the podcast grow and also help more people get outside and into hunting, which is what Persistence Outdoors is all about. So thank you for being part of that mission, and let's talk more about shotguns. So there are 3 common types of shotguns: break action shotguns, pump action shotguns, and semi-automatic or autoloader shotguns. And pretty much any shotgun that you will use for hunting will fit into one of these groups. There are some other types of shotguns that are kind of less common, like bolt action shotguns or even lever action shotguns. But if you go to a sporting goods store, you are going to find one of these 3. So let's talk about each of these types of shotguns individually. The first type is the break action shotgun. A break action shotgun has a hinge between the forend and the stock in the back part of the shotgun. And when you quote unquote break the shotgun, the breech end of the barrel will be exposed and you can put a shell into that end of the barrel. You've got a couple different types of break action shotguns. You have single shot break action shotguns, and then you also have side by side or over under shotguns. Side by side shotguns are your classic double barrel sort of Western shotgun. They have 2 barrels that are right next to each other on a horizontal plane. And then over under shotguns have two barrels that are stacked on top of each other on a vertical plane. And so they allow you to have two shots every time you load the shotgun. So on a broad level, they are all very similar. On a nitty-gritty level, the over-unders and the side-by-sides are actually a lot more mechanically complicated. But from a user experience standpoint, you are going to manipulate them in a similar way. Let's talk about some of the pros and cons. So one of the advantages of this type of shotgun is that it is very simple to use. And this makes it great for new shooters and great for kids, people who need something that is simple so that they can stay safe and focused in the field. A nice thing about a break action shotgun is that when it's broken, quote unquote broken, it is obviously safe. The gun can't fire. And so if you give a new shooter a break action shotgun, maybe it's just a single shot, you can tell from a long distance away whether their shotgun is safe or not, simply because it's open. And so that's a huge advantage. Maybe you're a dad and you have a couple kids and they're responsible and you trust them with a gun, but you just want an extra measure of precaution. A single shot break action shotgun is a great way to go. Break action shotguns are also easy to clean, and they can be lighter than some of these other shotgun models that we will talk about. They tend to be very dependable because of that sort of simple design, and you're not dealing with cycling a shell the way that you are with a pump action or a semi-automatic shotgun. Now, on the flip side, you do have a few disadvantages. The first one is limited capacity. Whether you have one or two barrels, you have less capacity than a pump action or a semi-automatic shotgun. Another thing is their versatility. You're rarely, if ever, going to see a double-barreled shotgun that you can mount a scope or a red dot on. And so they're limited to wing shooting or just shooting without a sight. And you may find single shot shotguns that do have the option to mount some sort of sight on them. But with those double-barreled shotguns, they're really purpose-built for wing shooting. Another disadvantage can be the price. The double-barreled over and under shotguns are actually very mechanically complicated inside in the action. You're dealing with one trigger that needs to be able to fire two different barrels, right? And so a good over-under shotgun can cost you a lot of money. Now, that's not always the case with any break-action shotgun. A single shot shotgun can be a lot less expensive. So you do have a range. It just depends what you're looking for. The next type of shotgun that you will commonly encounter, and perhaps the most popular type of shotgun in the US, is the pump action shotgun. The pump action shotgun tends to be hard wearing and reliable. They can be very inexpensive, but still functional. And they are extremely, extremely versatile. One of the great things about a pump action shotgun is that it will cycle any shell that fits in the gun. So if you have a chamber and say it's a 3-inch chamber, any shell that's 3 inches or less that you can fit into that gun, you can then pump the action and it will eject that shell after it's been fired. And so this versatility is very helpful if you are hoping to hunt with slugs one weekend and then take the same shotgun next month to hunt ducks with it, and you're using different types of ammo for both. It's great to have a shotgun that will cycle just any type of ammo. This is different than a semi-automatic shotgun, for example. A semi-automatic shotgun, you may need to adjust depending on the load that you use. so that your ammo cycles properly. Another advantage of a pump action shotgun is the capacity. You generally have a capacity of 5 shells plus 1 in the action. Now, if you're hunting waterfowl, you have to put a plug in your shotgun so that the shotgun overall only holds 3 shells. But still, that's 1 better than an over-under shotgun or 2 better than a single shot shotgun. For most hunters, I'm going to start out by recommending a pump action shotgun. They're just great in so many different scenarios. Duck hunters like them because a pump action shotgun can get dirty, but you can still work the pump. And then if it gets too clogged or jammed or something, it's very easy to take apart in the field and diagnose or clean and then put back together. So for most hunters, a pump action shotgun is a good way to go. There are a few drawbacks though. One is the rate of fire. So with a semi-automatic or a double-barreled shotgun, you have near instantaneous follow-up shots. With a pump action shotgun, you have to pump the action, like the name suggests, every time in between shots. And so this results in a slightly slower rate of fire. You can certainly get real fast with it, but it's going to be slower than a semi-auto where you just pull the trigger twice and it's boom, boom. Also, pumping that action can throw you off target or disrupt your swing. So think about having an over-under shotgun. You shoot once, you deal with the recoil, but then you're still swinging through and you're on target. With a pump action, you shoot, deal with the recoil, you're pumping at the same time, and that's a lot of motion. And now you have to reacquire your target. And that's going to take longer than either of the other shotgun types. Again, it's not huge, and people find them serviceable and hunt birds with them all the time, but it's something to consider. The third type of shotgun that you are likely to encounter is a semi-automatic shotgun, also called an autoloader. A semi-automatic shotgun uses gas or inertia from firing the gun to cycle the next shell. So you can pull the trigger and then it automatically cycles that next shell, and all you have to do is pull the trigger again. So a semi-automatic shotgun is very nice for fast shooting. And another advantage is that because some of that gas or the inertia, some of that energy is being used to cycle the next shell, it actually reduces the recoil of the gun. So a semi-automatic shotgun is going to kick you less than a pump action shotgun or a break action shotgun. And that can be very nice if you're shooting a whole lot, or if you're just a little bit recoil sensitive, or even if you're not and you just want a more comfortable gun, having that reduced recoil can be a huge benefit. Now, one of the disadvantages of a semi-automatic shotgun is that it is hard to clean. It's got a complicated mechanism inside of it, and it's easy for it to get gummed up or jammed, and it's not going to be easy to strip down in the field, diagnose the problem, and then put it back together. And also, because it has that complicated action, it just is more prone to getting gummed up. And many people who use a semi-automatic shotgun actually clean it after every hunt. You also may need to adjust the shotgun for different loads. Like we talked about earlier, a semi-automatic shotgun that's tuned for a 3-inch load may not cycle a 2 3/4 inch load or even a 2.5 inch load. You may have to retune the mechanism. So that is a big pain if you're trying to use different loads or if you're switching between game animals that you're hunting. Another drawback of semi-automatic shotguns is that they can be expensive. They are likely going to cost you more than a pump action shotgun to get a quality semi-auto, and they may not cost as much as a nice over-under shotgun, but they're not going to be cheap either. So the style of shotgun that you choose is largely personal preference. It also depends on what you are going to hunt. You're not often going to see a nice over-under shotgun in a duck blind, because likely in a duck blind, you're going to get your shotgun wet or muddy. It's just inevitable at some point if you hunt enough. And then you might prefer to bring your single shot shotgun with you when you're hiking around in the mountain hunting for upland game, because you don't want to carry your heavy semi-automatic shotgun. So again, it just depends on the situation. I like to use the 80-20 rule when trying to make decisions like this. If I know that 80% of my hunting is going to be waterfowl hunting, I'm going to choose a shotgun for that. Or if I know that 80% of my hunting is going to be quail hunting or pheasant hunting, I'm going to choose a shotgun more geared towards that. All right, so once you decide what style of shotgun you want to get, you will also want to choose a gauge. The shotgun gauge just refers to the diameter of the bore and what type of shells the shotgun is chambered for. The gauge numbers, as they increase, indicate a smaller shotgun bore. So 2 of the most common gauges are 12 gauges and 20 gauges. 12 gauges have a larger bore diameter, and 20 gauges have a smaller bore diameter. The same would go for a 16 gauge and a 28 gauge. 16 gauge is larger, 28 gauge is smaller. There's also one shotgun out there that is called a 410, and that's actually measured in caliber. So the diameter of the bore on a 410 shotgun is 0.410 inches. Not entirely sure why they named it that way and why it bucks convention, but it's out there and it's the smallest commonly available shotgun size. The gauge of your shotgun is going to determine a number of different things. The first one is effective range. A 12 gauge shot shell, because it has a bigger diameter than a 20 gauge shot shell, for example, the 12 gauge shot shell can hold more pellets than a 20 gauge shot shell. And so that means that when you fire the gun, more pellets are flying down range, and you will have more opportunities to hit your target. And this increased number of pellets and therefore opportunities to hit your target means that you are more likely to hit and kill animals at a further range. It's kind of a common misconception that a 12 gauge is more powerful than a 20 gauge. In a way it is, because it's shooting a heavier load, but the actual pellets generally aren't traveling much faster, if at all faster, than the pellets fired from a 20 gauge shotgun with an equivalent sort of shot shell. So it's actually the number of pellets that gives you increased efficacy at long range. And so if you're trying to shoot further distances, maybe you're hunting turkeys, it's advantageous to have a 12 gauge shotgun. Another thing that gauge is going to play a part in is recoil. With a 12 gauge shotgun, you're shooting that heavier load, and therefore it is going to recoil more than a 20 gauge shotgun. Now, other things come into play with this. It depends how heavy the shotgun is and what sort of action it has. But generally, a 12 gauge shotgun is going to recoil more than an equivalent 20 gauge shotgun. The gauge may also determine the weight of the gun. Because you have a larger bore diameter, the barrel of the gun is going to weigh more and you're going to need more material in the action. So 12 gauge guns are going to weigh more than 20 gauge guns. I keep mentioning 12 and 20 gauge guns because those are the two most popular options. And for your first shotgun, I recommend that you buy a 12 or 20 gauge because you will have the most ammo availability and it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg every time you go shooting. Another thing you'll notice is the length of the chamber. Some shotguns will be chambered for 3-inch shells. Other shotguns may only be chambered for 2 3/4-inch shells. And some will even be chambered for 3.5-inch long shells. Generally speaking, 3 inches is long enough. You're going to be able to hunt pretty much whatever you want successfully. 3.5-inch shells are for some very dedicated turkey hunters or goose hunters who want even more shot in their shot shell. And it's great if you want to do that. It doesn't sound super fun to me to shoot that over and over again because it will have heavy recoil and it's not necessary to have a positive hunting experience. So if you want to get something chambered for 3.5-inch, go for it. But for most people, a 3-inch chamber is going to be plenty. So how do you choose between a 12 gauge, a 20 gauge, or any other gauge for that matter? I would just say, what's important to you? What are you going to prioritize? If you are trying to find the shotgun that shoots the furthest range or has the furthest effective range with birdshot, I would say go for a 12 gauge. If you're trying to find a shotgun that doesn't recoil as hard, go for a 20 gauge. If you're trying to find a lighter weight shotgun, you might choose a 20 gauge. It also depends on what you're hunting. Let's say you're hunting small game. It really doesn't take a lot of shot to kill a small game animal. You could use 2 3/4-inch shells successfully, and you could use a 20 gauge and be just fine. You will have a smaller pattern, so you may have a slightly less likelihood of hitting the animal, so you might have to shoot a little bit better. But as far as effectively killing the animal and also enjoying walking around with a lighter gun, you might go with a 20 gauge shotgun. Now, if you're hunting turkeys, turkeys are hard to get close enough to kill. They have great eyesight. And so it's advantageous to have a further effective range. So for turkeys, generally, I would recommend use a 12 gauge shotgun. That doesn't mean you can't kill a turkey with a 20 gauge shotgun. It just means that you are going to have a slight advantage with a 12 gauge. Now, what if you're primarily hunting deer with your shotgun? If that's your main pursuit, I would recommend a 20 gauge because you are going to have a little bit less recoil and the external ballistics of a 20 gauge slug are going to be a little bit better than that heavy 12 gauge slug. If you're hunting waterfowl, I would generally recommend a larger gauge as well, because with waterfowl, you have to use non-toxic shot, which is usually going to be steel. Steel is less dense than lead, so you have to use larger shot sizes to get the equivalent effect. And the larger the pellets, the fewer you can fit into a shot shell. So having that larger bore diameter of something like a 12 gauge can be advantageous because then you can have more pellets overall in your shot shell than you could with a smaller gauge. Now, you can kill animals with either gauge of shotgun, so don't let it prevent you from getting out and hunting. If you've got a 20 gauge and you want to hunt turkeys, go hunt turkeys. You may have to reduce the range at which you take shots a little bit, but you're still going to have a great time. So don't ever let it be an excuse for not hunting. All right, let's talk about shotgun chokes. There are two types of chokes, and these are fixed chokes or interchangeable chokes. If your shotgun doesn't have threading at the end of the barrel to screw in a choke, it likely has a fixed choke. But if it does have that threading, you can change the pattern of your shot by using different choke tubes. So a choke is just a constriction in the bore diameter that happens at the end of the barrel of a shotgun. And a tighter choke is going to make your pellets come out of the shotgun closer together. And this can be helpful when you're shooting further distances. So if you have the opportunity to change out the chokes on your shotgun, it just depends on what distance you are shooting your targets at. If you are shooting at closer distances, maybe say out to 20 or 25 yards, you might just use an improved cylinder choke, which is one step up from a smooth cylinder bore, no choke at all. Or if you're trying to shoot targets out at 40 yards or beyond, you might use a full choke, and that's going to make a denser pattern at distance. Now, the disadvantage of a tighter choke is that closer in, you are going to have a smaller pattern and therefore reduce your chances of hitting your target. So it just depends on what you're hunting. There's 3 main chokes: the improved cylinder, the modified choke, and the full choke. And I'll give you examples of when I would use each different type. So for turkey hunting, I tend to use a full choke. If I'm duck hunting, I would likely use a modified choke. Steel shot actually patterns tighter than lead. So using a modified choke with steel will give you results more like a full choke with lead. And then if I was hunting rabbits or snowshoe hares, I might use an improved cylinder choke because I expect them to hang tight until I'm pretty close, and then I expect them to run. And so having that improved cylinder choke will give me a wider pattern at a shorter range and give me a better chance of hitting that animal. Another time you might use an improved cylinder choke is when you are decoying birds. So they are flying into your spread, maybe they're doves or even ducks, and they're going to be at very close range when you decide to shoot them. Oh, and one other thing you should consider is shooting with slugs. You may shoot slugs with no choke at all or with an improved cylinder choke if it helps increase your accuracy. All right, let's talk about the type of barrel that goes on a shotgun. There are a couple different options with a shotgun barrel. The first is the length. Longer shotgun barrels tend to be good for smooth swings and recoil management when you're shooting. So if you're shooting birds and you're trying to shoot them out of the air, it's nice to have a long barrel that helps you make a smooth movement as you swing and track the bird. Now, long barrels aren't always ideal. Sometimes if you're turkey hunting, you're not doing that movement at all. You're not swinging when you're shooting the bird. So it's actually helpful to have a shorter barrel when you're turkey hunting because you're going to be in thick brush and maybe trying to maneuver, and it's going to be helpful to not have all that extra length. You can also get rifled shotgun barrels, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but they are interchangeable barrels that can go on your shotgun, and they have the rifling on the inside, and it can help with accuracy when you're shooting slugs. They're made specifically for shooting slugs. And rifled shotgun barrels are kind of an answer to restrictions set in place in certain areas that say you can only shoot short range weapons. And so since rifles are considered long range weapons, you can't use those, but you can get away sometimes with using a shotgun with a rifled barrel. Check your regulations, of course, before doing this. But they can be helpful to give you a little bit extra range and accuracy when shooting slugs. One thing you should watch out for when choosing a shotgun barrel, if you want to hunt waterfowl, you need to make sure that you have a shotgun that can shoot steel. Some of the older models of shotguns were made with steel that is not hard enough to accommodate a steel shotgun load. And so you can actually damage the barrel when you shoot steel down them. So if you're going to go waterfowl hunting, just get something modern or something that you know is safe for steel. Kind of related to the barrel are your sighting options. Sometimes if you get a rifled shotgun barrel, it will also come with open sights on that barrel. And that can be super helpful because then you're ready to hunt out to 100 yards easily with a shotgun and a slug. You can also get shotguns that are drilled and tapped to receive scope rings, and then you can actually put a scope on it and use it just the way you would on a rifle. You can find some shotguns that have some sort of rail that allows you to mount a scope or a red dot on them. And having that extra versatility is really helpful because then you can go hunt deer with your shotgun very successfully with some sort of optic. So keep that in mind if you're looking at different types of barrels, and especially if you are considering hunting with slugs. Okay, so if you've considered all those different factors, you will likely be able to find a shotgun that works for you. However, I do have 2 quick recommendations for you, especially if you're just starting out. So one shotgun that I have is a Mossberg Maverick 88, and this is the ultimate budget shotgun. It's a pump action shotgun. It's super utilitarian. It really has nothing fancy. It's a plastic stock and forend, but you can get it for less than $300, and it functions like a normal shotgun. You can hunt with it. I've hunted with mine plenty. It hits the things that I pointed at. I've never had an issue with it cycling. And so for less than $300, it opens up a whole world of hunting opportunities. And it's a really great way to get into hunting at a very low price point. A Mossberg Maverick 88 is sort of the budget version of a Mossberg 500, which is also a decent option. And like we were talking about with different barrels, you can actually interchange Mossberg 500 barrels with Mossberg Maverick 88 barrels. So if you wanted to get something besides the standard field barrel, you could get a barrel with open sights on it, a rifled slug barrel with open sights on it. You could get a slug barrel that has a cantilever mount for a scope. And that cantilever mount is just a little piece of rail that is attached to the barrel that you can mount a scope on. And for the price of one good rifle, you could get a Mossberg Maverick 88 with a field barrel, just a smooth shotgun barrel for shooting birds, and a rifled barrel. And that would cost you all of maybe $500, $600. And you would be covered for most any deer hunting within 100 yards and any type of wing shooting or small game hunting. So for the price, you can't beat it. If you were just trying to find the most inexpensive way to get into hunting and have lots of opportunities, that would be the way to go. If you want a shotgun that looks nicer, feels nicer, and is still reliable and relatively affordable, you should check out a Remington 870. A Remington 870 is one of the most popular pump action shotgun models ever made, and it really does provide great value for often less than $600. They're super reliable, and there's a couple different versions of the Remington 870. If you want one that you can use for duck hunting, pheasant hunting, small game hunting, deer hunting, check out the Remington 870 Fieldmaster. The Fieldmaster is drilled and tapped on top of the receiver so that you can add scope rings or a rail and then mount a scope on it. But if you don't want to do that, it will function just as well as a shotgun for wing shooting or small game hunting. So the Remington 870, especially the Fieldmaster version, is an excellent option. And again, you can find it for less than $600. All right, guys. Well, that's about it for today. I feel like we've covered a lot of ground in the last few weeks, getting people prepared to go hunting, and it's just in time. Here in Idaho, the September hunting season has kicked off, and right now you can hunt archery elk, you can hunt bears, grouse, turkeys, wolves, mountain lions. So it's an exciting time to be out in the woods, and it will only get better as the season progresses. So if you've been thinking about buying a shotgun or a rifle and getting out hunting this fall, now is the time. And if you're already looking forward to it, don't forget to practice your shooting. With that, I will wrap this up. I'm going to head out and look for some bears eating huckleberries this evening, and I will catch you next week.